Picture this. You are standing on the front porch of a small wooden cottage in eastern Alaska. The cottage is painted faded red. The door is unlocked. A kitchen table sits in the front room. A child's wooden toy lies on the floor. A calendar on the wall is opened to November 1938. The family who lived here left on November 9th, 1938. They had 3 days to pack, and they could only carry what fit on a single train. Everything else was left behind. To understand why 200 Americans walked out of this valley in 72 hours and never came back, we have to go to the summer of 1900 and to two American prospectors named Jack Smith and Clarence Warner. Smith and Warner are walking along a ridge above the Kennecott Glacier in eastern Alaska. They have walked nearly 200 miles through wilderness to reach this spot. Their boots are wet through. The temperature drops below freezing every night. They are not looking for gold. They are looking for copper, because the new American electrical grid is consuming copper faster than mines in the lower 48 can produce it. On a clear day in August of 1900, they look up at a cliff above the glacier and see a green stain spread across the rock face. The green is malachite, the surface form of copper ore. They climb up to it. What they find is not a vein. It is an entire mountain face of nearly pure copper. A young mining engineer named Stephen Birch hears the rumor and travels to the site. Birch tests the rock and immediately understands what he is looking at. The cliff Smith and Warner found contains the richest copper ore ever recorded on Earth. Some samples test at over 70% pure copper. A typical commercial copper deposit is around 2%. Birch buys the claim, carries the test samples to New York, and walks into a meeting with Daniel Guggenheim and the bankers of J.P. Morgan and Company. The Guggenheim and Morgan syndicate agrees to fund the operation. They incorporate the Kennecott Mines Corporation in 1907. They commit $25 million in initial capital, equivalent to roughly $850 million in today's money. This is the original Kennecott in eastern Alaska, not the larger Kennecott copper operation that today owns the Bingham Canyon mine in Utah. That came later. This came first. There is one problem. The richest copper deposit in human history is sitting 200 miles from the nearest ocean port, behind a wall of glaciers, frozen rivers, and active mountain ranges. To move the ore out, the syndicate has to build a railroad through country that no railroad engineer believed could be crossed. They hire Michael J. Henney, an Irish-American railroad builder, who had already cut a railway through the mountain passes of the Yukon during the gold rush. Henney spends 3 years laying 196 miles of narrow-gauge track. His crews bridge the Copper River while it is still moving with breakup ice. They blast tunnels through frozen rock at 40 below zero. Workers die in the avalanches and the river crossings, and most of their names are never written down. The Copper River and Northwestern Railway is completed in 1911. If you want more stories about American places where the doors were locked and never opened again, subscribe to Sealed America. There is a new one every week, and what is still inside the next one is even stranger than this. At the upper end of that railroad, in a basin between two glaciers, the company builds the Kennecott Concentration Mill. It stands 14 stories tall. It is the largest industrial structure raised in the Alaskan wilderness up to that point. Around the mill, the company builds a complete town from scratch. Bunkhouses for the single men, family cottages painted that same faded red, a school, a hospital, a general store, a power plant, a recreation hall with a hardwood gymnasium floor shipped piece by piece from the lower 48. At peak, about 300 residents live in the town year-round. Between 1911 and 1938, the Kennecott Mill processes 4.6 million tons of ore. It produces approximately 1.18 billion pounds of refined copper. The wire that electrified small-town America in the 1920s and 1930s was largely pulled from this single mountain. On November 9, 1938, the company calls the residents into the recreation hall. The geologists have finished their final survey. The high-grade ore is finished. There is no second deposit. Continuing operations would lose money. The company tells the families they have 72 hours to be on the train. Whatever they cannot carry will stay where it is. Picture the scene inside one of those red cottages on the night of November 9th. A woman is standing in her kitchen, looking at her own china in the cabinet on the wall, deciding which 2 plates to take and which 40 to leave. Her children's school papers are still in the desk in the next room. Her husband's tools are in the shed. None of it is coming with her. 48 hours later, on November 11th, 1938, the last train pulls out of Kennecott carrying around 200 people and what they could fit in suitcases. The company sells the railroad for scrap the following year, and the rails are pulled up. But the mill and the town are too remote to demolish, so the syndicate simply walks away and leaves them. For more than 40 years, the buildings stand alone in the wilderness, with the dishes still on the tables and the payroll ledgers still on the desks. In 1980, the federal government incorporates the entire region into Wrangell St. Elias National Park, the largest national park in the United States at 13.2 million acres. Since 1998, the National Park Service has been quietly stabilizing the buildings, not restoring them, just keeping them from falling. I have walked through those red cottages myself, and I have stood inside the mill on the second floor where the copper concentration tables still sit. The light comes through the broken windows the same way it came through them in 1938. The Ahtna Athabascan people walked this valley for thousands of years before any of it began. They walk it still. Everyone who came after them, the prospectors, the bankers, the engineers, the families in the red cottages, every one of them is gone. The copper they pulled out of this mountain is in the wall behind you right now, in the wires that run through your house, somewhere between your fuse box and your light switch. It traces back to a green stain on a cliff face in August of 1900. Nobody stopped to thank them. Nobody stopped to look. If this story moved you, subscribe so the next sealed place finds you. The doors are closed. The places are forgotten. We are the only ones still telling these stories. Sealed America, every week.